southern border in the middle part of the state. I serve as chair of this committee. The committee will take up the bills in the order posted outside of the hearing room. The list will be updated after each hearing to identify which bill is currently being heard. Our hearing today is your public part of the legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your position on the proposed legislation before us today. We do ask you limit handouts. This is important to note. If you are unable to attend a public hearing and would like your position stated for the record, you must submit your position and any comments using the legislature's online database by 12 p.m. the day prior to the hearing. Letters emailed to a senator or staff member will not be part of the permanent record. You must use the online database in order to become part of the permanent record. To better facilitate today's hearing, I ask that you abide by the following practices. Please turn off cell phones and other electronic devices. The order of testimony is introducer, proponents, opponents, neutral, and closing remarks. If you will be testifying, please complete the green form and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you have written materials that you would like distributed to the committee, please hand them to the page to distribute. We need 11 copies for all committee members and staff. If you need additional copies, please ask a page to make copies for you now. When you begin to testify, please state and spell your name for the record. Please be concise. It is my request that you limit your testimony to 4 minutes. If necessary, we will use the light system. Green is 3 minutes, yellow 1 minute, red, please wrap up your comments. If there are a lot of people wishing to testify, we will use the 3-minute testimony limit. If your remarks were reflected in previous testimony, or if you would like your position to be known but do not wish to testify, please sign the white form at the back of the room, and it will be included in the official record. Please speak directly into the microphone so our transcribers are able to hear your testimony clearly. I'd like to introduce the committee staff. To my immediate right is research analyst Jack Sprague. To my right at the end of the table is committee clerk Kennedy. The committee members will with us today will introduce themselves, beginning at my far right.
Good morning, Rita Sanders, representing District 45, the Bellevue Offset community.
Good morning, Luann Lenahan, representing District 39, Elkhorn and Waterloo in Douglas County.
Good morning, Joni Albright, District 17, Wayne, Thurston, Dakota, and a portion of Dixon County in northeast Nebraska.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Walls. I represent Legislative District 15, which is all of Dodge County and now Valley.
Good morning, Tom Parisi. I represent District 41.
Justin Wayne, represent District 13, which is North Omaha and northeast Douglas County.
And we'll welcome our pagers to stand up and pages to stand up and tell us what they're studying and where.
All right, I'm Ryan, freshman at UNL. I'm studying business administration.
I'm Morgan. I'm a senior at UNL with studying political science.
Thank you. Please remember that senators may come and go during our hearing as they may have bills to introduce in other committees. Refrain from applause or other indications of support or opposition. For our audience, the microphones in the room are not for amplification, but for recording purposes only. Lastly, we use electronic devices to distribute information. Therefore, you may see committee members referencing information on their electronic devices. Be assured that your presence here today and your testimony are important to us and are critical to our state government. And now we will open the hearing with LB 762, Senator DeBoer. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Merman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Wendy DeBoer, W-E-N-D-Y-D-E-B-O-E-R, and I represent District 10 in Northwest Omaha. I appear today to introduce LB 762, which instructs the State Department of Education to create a teacher apprenticeship program in Nebraska. Members of this committee have heard and will continue to hear plenty about how we are facing a teacher shortage in this state. And I believe we're all in agreement that we need to do everything we can to be sure that we continue to have outstanding teachers in Nebraska, continue providing high-quality education to our students. But we know that we need strategic interventions to meet the need for future teachers. We need to get creative without sacrificing quality. In December of last year, the Council of State Governments hosted their annual conference. I was fortunate to attend this year, partially because it was in Hawaii in December, but also because when I was there, I attended a panel on alleviating teacher shortages. In that session, there was a presenter from Tennessee who described an innovative teacher apprenticeship program called Grow Your Own, which has since been deployed in other states in various capacities. In these states include Arkansas, Colorado, California, Delaware, Florida, Louisiana, Michigan, Missouri, North Dakota, South Carolina, Texas, Washington, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Following the creation of the initial program in Tennessee, Tennessee officials sought to have this model officially recognized by the U.S. Department of Labor as a recognized apprenticeship program. This federal recognition is crucial as it allows states to leverage federal apprenticeship dollars to augment apprenticeship programs in each state. So following the CSG conference, I began looking into bringing this program to Nebraska. And my office discovered that the Nebraska Department of Education had already identified teacher apprenticeships as a priority in their policy priorities publication titled Nebraska Ready PK through 12 Policy Priorities. It was identified as priority 6, eliminate the special education staffing vacancy and cut the educator shortage by half by 2030. So additionally, 2 exciting things have happened federally in this last year regarding teacher apprenticeship programs. First, the U.S. Secretary of Education called upon the states to create their own programs following the Tennessee model. And second, the U.S. Department of Labor announced $100 million worth of grants available for states to take advantage of for registered teacher apprenticeship programs, which increases the importance of getting a program off the ground in Nebraska. Essentially what happens is we have to create a program, get it recognized, and get it up and running, and then we'll be available or we'll be able to take advantage of some of that grant money. There's no one-size-fits-all model for apprenticeship programs. Each state's needs and abilities are different, which is why LB 762 gives a great amount of latitude to the Department of Education to create the most appropriate model for Nebraska. But typically, a teacher apprenticeship replaces traditional student teaching with a year-long paid apprenticeship. So a prospective teacher apprentice is a student who's pursuing an education certification either through an undergraduate or a graduate program. The student then either contracts with a school district directly or receives money through a state program, which is in partnership with school districts and is then placed in a school. This, for the student, helps mitigate the high cost of becoming a teacher. It provides a salary for them sooner, and it helps them overall to afford their educational costs. So the question then is, do we need to chip in state funds? And the answer is probably, because we've seen that at least to get these up and running, we're going to have to do that. And in other states, the most successful models cover the cost of tuition for the apprentice. And so long as they continue to meet the qualifications of the program as the department, then they're able to get those funds. So in other words, a little money from us can get this program off the ground, start training teachers more effectively with a year-long apprenticeship rather than just one semester for student teaching. And ultimately, it's a lower cost to the students. You'll notice on page 2, line 22 through 24, which is subsection 6 of LB 762, I left the dollar amount to be filled in by the committee. The Department of Education, the Nebraska Department of Education, gave me a preliminary estimate that if we were to cover the cost of tuition, the apprentice salary, the observing teachers, et cetera, we would need $30,000 per apprentice, which when we include costs for NDE staffs, program development, to cover the 30 apprentices, The department estimated a cost of approximately $1.1 million, but of course we can scale the program up or down, and once established, we can apply for the federal funding for that program. The State Department of Education submitted a letter in support for LB 762. They won't be here today, but they've indicated that they'd be willing to answer questions about how they envision the program working in Nebraska if you should have further questions. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you would have now. So thank you for considering LB 762, and I strongly urge you to support this program in Nebraska.
Do we have any questions for Senator DeBoer at this time? Senator Albright.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thanks for bringing the bill. This is quite a concern out there. But in the fiscal note that we have in front of us, it doesn't say anything about 1.1 million.
That's because it can go, you guys decide what you want.
Okay, and then looking at under education, prepared by Lane Carr, it talks about what you have talked about, the tuition, the payroll, apprentice stipends, and observing a teacher. And they were talking, so tell me about this other program that they already had started.
No, they just had identified the development of teacher
So
apprenticeships
there's no
as a
bill
good idea.
at this point.
So there is not. There are some teacher apprenticeship programs throughout the state. I'm not, like little ones that are starting in little pockets, but I'm not really sure how they are or where they are.
The fiscal note, and it, like Metro Community College said, there would be no additional expenses to the college. So are you talking about the students that are starting their program brand new? Or are you talking about people who, like yesterday, we talked a lot about if you're 40 years old and you have been out in the work field and you've decided that you have enough education, you'd like to go back and be a teacher. With something like this,
So the department can kind of develop whichever model or both models that they would like. So if you already have a bachelor's degree, let's say, and you've been in the workforce, and you would like to change careers to become a teacher, this would help you to do that. You still have to make up some of those pedagogy classes and things like that. But at least when you get to the part where you're doing the student teaching, instead of that, you can sub in this apprenticeship program. I think there's some other sort of long-term benefits of having apprentices because, you know, they have a year in the classroom. When they were talking about the program in Tennessee, one of the things they said is you see, you know, start, middle, finish the whole year. So there's both pedagogical reasons for doing an apprenticeship, and there's also the sort of financial well-being of the individuals. So we can either couple it with, and these programs have to be developed, obviously, but we can either couple it with your standard, you know, somebody comes straight through, goes to college kind of programs, or we can do a change of career model, or we could do both, which, you know, considering our teacher shortage, we might look into eventually standing up both kinds of programs.
okay, thank you for bringing the bill.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Senator DeBoer? Okay, thank you. Do we have proponents for LB 762? Welcome.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm new to this. Do I just start or, okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Stephanie Howell, StephanieHowell, and I'm here today to speak in support of LB 762. I've been a high school social studies teacher for 16 years now. My credentials include teaching at the Career Academy here in Lincoln, teaching AP courses for 8 years at my previous high school, having a master's degree in historical studies from Nebraska Wesleyan, being named the 2019 Krista McAuliffe Courage in Education Award winner, and a Lincoln Journal Star A+ educator. I have trained countless student teachers over the years, in addition to hosting practicum students. The road here was not an easy one. It wasn't until I was a 27-year-old single mother of a 6-year-old son that I realized what my calling in life really was. You see, up to that time, I had served in our nation's military and was working at the state penitentiary as a correctional corporal. While I enjoyed the work, it wasn't fulfilling. I decided to use my VA benefits to go back to school full-time to earn my degree in education. Those 5 years of undergrad work were incredibly hard and frustrating. I was unable to continue working as the classes I needed were only offered during the daytime, and I had no one to watch my son in the evening, not to mention I needed to find time for my studies. Luckily, I had vocational rehab benefits from VA to help offset my living expenses. During this time, I was also expected to have practicum experiences and to student teach as well, all without pay. Ultimately, I was successful and graduated from UNL. However, I can tell you I wasn't fully prepared to enter the classroom. Had I had the opportunity to work in an apprenticeship program while getting my content coursework completed, I know I would have been much better prepared to enter the classroom as a full-time educator. No amount of traditional classroom teacher training truly prepares a new educator for what they will experience in the classroom. Student teaching is a good start, but to be candid, it is often exploitative work in which student teachers are often thrown into the fire, so to speak, and are expected to just figure it out. Our budding teachers deserve better than this. This is why I am in favor of an apprenticeship program for teachers in Nebraska. Other states pay student teachers, which is a significant draw for Nebraska students to student teach elsewhere. A paid apprenticeship would help alleviate that. Many classes undergraduates are required to take do not actually help when in the classroom, within the school classroom environment. A paid apprenticeship would mean a new educator could learn the best practices for the classroom environment from a master veteran teacher. A teacher apprenticeship program would also allow us as Nebraskans to build up our own. We can identify talented students early on and help them get into teacher training programs and apprenticeships that will train and teach them about the profession. Teachers make all other careers possible. It only makes sense that we treat the education field as one that requires specialization with skills that can't be easily learned anywhere else but on the job, while taking the necessary coursework to be competent in the field of education. We are in a national crisis with a growing teacher shortage. Educators are tired of not being treated as the professionals they are. Young people do not want to have to pay to work during student teaching. We need to be innovative in how we recruit and retain the best and brightest in our Nebraska classrooms to educate children, our future workforce, and leaders. I believe that creating a state teacher apprenticeship program would be instrumental in accomplishing that goal. I encourage each of you to vote in favor of LB 762. Thank you for your time, and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Howell?
Thank you.
Senator Walls.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. I don't really have a question. I just want to say that you certainly are a wealth of knowledge. We really appreciate you
Thank you,
coming
Senator.
today to testify. Hope you get used to that chair and you come back and testify some more. And last thing I want to say is thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Senator. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Any other questions? So, thank you. Any other proponents? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Regler, Katherin. Last name Regler, Regler. All right. My name is Kate Regler, and I'm in my 9th year of teaching. My current position is with Lincoln Public Schools, where I've worked since 2020. At the time I decided I wanted to be a teacher, I had already earned a bachelor's degree. I had a family with 3 children, and my husband was working as an EMT. We decided I would return to school to become a teacher, and then he could go back to school and become a paramedic. I'm assuming that EMTs still do not make much money, but I can assure you that in 2010, they were undercompensated. The economic reality was that I needed to take out a regrettable amount of student loans to take the necessary classes to become a teacher. I also worked part-time. When I started my program, I had a newborn, a toddler, and a preschooler, which meant I also had to pay for childcare to attend classes. In addition, most of my classes were only offered in person and were a part of a cohort experience, so there was no choice in scheduling. Finally, when I had worked my way through the program, it was time to student teach. We were all strongly encouraged by our program not to work during our student teaching experience. Even so, it was essential that I continue to work part-time even though my wages were meager. Meanwhile, the student teaching requirement is a full-time job, for which I also had to pay tuition. The only pay I ever received was when my cooperating teacher called in sick and I served as a substitute of record for the classes I was already student teaching. I worked about 50 hours a week to create lesson plans, provide instruction, and assess student work. I also attended parent-teacher conferences, meetings, and other duties as they were assigned. My situation might sound unique because I was the parent of small children when I decided to become a teacher. Nevertheless, given the current shortage of teachers, I can only assume the state will need to begin looking to encourage not only traditional students, but also more non-traditional students to consider joining the profession. The debt that I took on to become a teacher is staggering. In addition, the wages I could have been earning while working through that program, I would also call a loss. I support teachers' apprenticeship programs. I want qualified and educated individuals to become educators. The substantial economic loss individuals face in the current process is a significant deterrent to becoming an educator. I also believe that a teacher apprenticeship program would attract more young people into the profession. My oldest child is now 17 and currently in the K-12 educator program at the Career Academy, which allows her to take education classes for college credit through SEC. In addition, she's actively involved in a practicum experience at a local school through her Career Academy program. However, as we have discussed her future, she wavers in her commitment to becoming a teacher. One of her most significant concerns is the cost of a teacher training program and the subsequent student teaching experience. Many of her friends are attending community college programs or taking apprenticeships in the trades. My daughter knows how much money her friends will save on education expenses, which appeals to her. Her friends entering the trades can earn while they learn. That is not currently the case with teaching candidates. Educators make all other professions possible. Every plumber, welder, and electrician started by learning math, reading, and writing in a classroom from a teacher. While our young people are considering their futures, many are encouraged to look to professions with reduced educational costs and increased opportunities to earn while learning. However, it all starts in a classroom with a teacher. In addition, during the pandemic, we were reminded of how vital it is for our schools to be open with students learning in person. It's critical to our communities thriving. Schools need teachers and our communities need schools. Therefore, it only makes sense to dedicate public dollars to the training of teachers. The bottom line is that we need to make teaching an attractive option for individuals choosing their career path. Those individuals could be brand new high school graduates like my daughter or non-traditional candidates like me. Unfortunately, if the cost of becoming a teacher is unpaid labor and an increased likelihood of paying debt, suitable candidates will make a different choice. Thank you for taking the time to hear my thoughts on the matter. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ms. Regler? If not, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 762? Any opponents for LB 762? Anyone wish to testify in the neutral position for LB 762? If not, Senator DeBoer, you're welcome to close. And while she's coming up, we have letters, 2 proponents, 1 opponent, 0 neutral. Please talk to the proponents. Okay, the proponents are John Scretta, Jolene Combs. Opponents are Connie Carr. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that you have the ability, or the Department of Education has the ability to craft exactly the way an apprenticeship program will look. But there's such an incredible opportunity right now that we should craft one, at least one in some direction, multiple ones if we can. And again, the cost can scale up or down. When I was sitting in that panel in Hawaii, I was sitting next to, I didn't notice it at the time because there was someone sitting between us. They left. And there it was, Senator Stinner, former Senator Stinner was on my right. And he and I afterwards looked over at each other and he said, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "We need to do this right away." It's a really good opportunity to take advantage of some federal apprenticeship money to try to make some kind of difference on our teacher shortage here in Nebraska. And I really think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I would encourage this committee to take a hard look at how we can make these things a reality, because we've got a lot of long-term thinking to do about our teacher shortage. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Any further questions for Senator DeBoer? Senator Conrad.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to defer, but thank you, Senator DeBoer. Really appreciate this thoughtful hearing and this thoughtful idea. And I think Senator Albright mentioned before, Senator Linehan's brought forward proposals, Senator Hansen, other senators, Senator Walls has brought forward proposals. I think everybody that's on the committee is uniquely aware that we have a crisis in terms of recruiting and retaining educational professionals to do the incredible work that they do across our state. I can tell you one thing that I'm struggling with as a new member of the committee, and maybe committee staff can look at it, or the educational community stakeholders can put their heads together, is just what exists, what are the gaps, what are the strategies with all these different policy choices we have before us, what helps short-term, mid-term, long-term, what leverages federal dollars. I feel like, we need some sort of like a policy choice grid or something like that to just kind of map it out. Because I think there's a lot of really smart solutions in play right now to address the teacher shortage. And I know that this committee is committed to trying to figure out how to do that most effectively. And so I'm not putting the burden on you and your office to put together that information, but I know that we have a lot of really smart stakeholders in the educational community across the state that maybe could help us think through that, to understand kind of how these measures work together or don't. But I wanted to just put that on the record and see if you had any thought to kind of how you see your proposal in the constellation of ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Conrad. I think there has to be a number of different strategies, right? As you say, there's some that will work better in the short run and some in the long run. I think we need to work on a number of different strategies to make our whole teacher education system more resilient in general, and more, I don't know, inducing to children and young people as they kind of come up through the K through 12 system to say, this is a real option for me. We know we're going to need a lot of teachers. We know we're going to need a lot of teachers, not just now, but 20 years from now, 30 years from now. That's just the way it's going to be. So we have to have some different programs in place, and some of that requires some creative thinking. And again, we've got some federal dollars we can leverage here. So, it's a kind of program, because Nebraska's, for the record, Nebraska's not the only one who's having teacher shortage problems, right? I remember hearing at CSG a couple of years before, some folks were talking, I serve on the education committee there, and some folks were talking about teacher shortages, and I was all smug thinking, well, we don't have that bad of a problem in Nebraska, but of course we do. So this is a perennial problem that we're going to have to work on as a country, but I think Nebraska ought to take advantage of some things while we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to continue the conversation at that point, I know it was a frequent refrain when I was out canvassing on the campaign trail, and it's continued into my transition to public service. But a broader, I think, issue that we need to connect the dots on is that when there's a relentless attack on public education and public education teachers, it undermines our ability to recruit and retain top talent through any number of these thoughtful and smart proposals that different senators have been brought forward. But we can't divorce those narratives from each other. And so I want to just make sure that we have kind of a strong perspective from those different points of view that are out there, that when we undermine public education, it undermines our shared values and goals to ensure that we have great teachers in the classroom.
Yeah, I just think it's really great how awesome our public schools are in Nebraska, and I want to continue to make them strong, and to all of our schools in Nebraska. So, this is a program that would teach for, every kind of teacher. So I think that's important.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Moore? Senator Albright.
Thank you. Piggybacking off of just what Senator Conrad had talked about, you would like to just give this to the Department of Education to develop something. I would like to see it more come from us, with a direction. And like you said, there's so many we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We need to just find the best practices that other states have used to see what we can do for Nebraska to make our program what it needs to be. And I think we have a lot of different players out there that would have to weigh in on it. And so for that, I'd like to just kind of concentrate on what type of a program we're going to recommend that they develop.
And I think you can, be more or less prescriptive. I mean, you all have the expertise, right? You're the education committee, so you have the expertise, along with the Department of Education, of course, who's had the time. I mean, as senators, we have a number of different issues that we, have to deal with on a given day. So, the Department of Education has the expertise of being able to look into the various states and what they've done and which programs have worked and which haven't. So I think it's probably a partnership between both this committee, which has the subject matter expertise in our body, and the department, which has the, real lived world experience of working with these kinds of programs.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Uh,
Senator Walls?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this piece of legislation, and especially for the two testifiers, both who were young moms. I was a young mom when I went back to school to get my teaching degree, so I understand completely how hard that is. So a program like this would be very welcome in the state and to a lot of young men and women who are raising families and trying to get through school. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one.
Yeah.
You mentioned it would cost approximately $30,000 per apprenticeship. Do you look at all of that cost going toward the apprentice, or does some of that go to the student teacher? Or how would you foresee that?
Yeah, so that was just kind of a back of the envelope estimate that the department gave me. Doesn't have to be the final answer. That was just kind of a throw out a ballpark number so we get a sense of it. And I think the vast majority of that goes to the apprentice. Maybe there's a little bit of administrative cost as well.
Okay. And then you mentioned federal dollars.
Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit more about what there is available?
Yeah, so there's that $100 million specifically in the Department of Labor for these teacher apprenticeship programs. What happened was the Tennessee official who was there at this panel was talking about how they went through the series to get their apprenticeship programs for teachers recognized by the U.S. Department of Labor as an apprenticeship program, just like a carpentry apprenticeship or some other kind of apprenticeship program. And once they went through that program, and there's a long process for getting it recognized and starting that with the U.S. Department of Labor and everything. Once that finished, then they said, okay, now we need to, both the Department of Labor and Tennessee said, we need to kind of evangelize to other states and show them this great program that we have that's worked. And I listed the states where they've developed a program like this. But really, if you look on growyourown.com, or we'll email you the link, you can see the folks who started this in Tennessee, and sort of they'll describe the program that they developed. But because it was recognized, the Department of Labor said, this is a fantastic idea, and we want to partner with states in this way. So there's been a large sum of money that's become available to states to use in these kinds of programs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you could email everybody on the committee that link, I think that'd be helpful. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that will close the hearing for 762, and we will open the hearing on LB 787. Senator Wayne. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Justin Wayne, Justinwayne, and I represent Legislative District 13, which is North Omaha and Northeast Douglas County. I want to start by saying I believe every child should have access to a high quality education, not by the chance they get into a good school, and not by privilege that they have a certain amount of income, but by right. Over a century ago, Frederick Douglass said, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. There has never been more truth to that statement than there is today. In a world where knowledge determines the value in the job market, where a child in Gearing, Nebraska competes with a student from China, education is the passport for any child's future. I fundamentally believe that America promises all children when they are born that if they get a high quality education, they will have a chance at a better life, a chance to obtain their passport to find the American dream. It is this promise and this dream that allows many children, people I represent, to transcend the barriers of race, gender, class, and achieve their God-given potential. It's the reason why I went to law school. It's the reason why I went to school. Is to pull myself up by the bootstraps and do something better for the kids after me. I am a proud Omaha Public School product. but I know that all school systems across the state need some support and new tools. And one of the new tools that I am introducing today is LB 787, the Adopt the STEM Development Act. The STEM Development Act will establish a grant program through the Department of Education to perform innovative curriculum and learning resources for Nebraska middle school and high school students related to science, technology, engineering, entrepreneurship, and mathematics. It would appropriate $5 million to the Department of Education to carry out this grant program. What I've learned through LB 1020 studies and MIT, I'm in a program out there, that the key to our future really is innovation and entrepreneurship. When you talk about closing the wealth gap, the only way you can do that is through equity. You can't earn your way out as a community out of the wealth gap. The only way you can close it is through equity. And the only way you can get equity is equity in a home or equity in a business. And that's usually small businesses starting and growing. And where we have to move as a state is in innovation. If you look at the biggest technology producers and the biggest human capital producers and where they are going to states and cities that have innovation. And that's the basis of this bill, is how do we capture the students when they are young to be innovative and to build entrepreneurial skill sets. So what you'll hear from people after me is computer programs, software that interact with kids and meet kids where they are. Yesterday, you heard me kind of go on a rant about programs don't change people, people change people. And they can change people by interacting with students where they are. So one of the games, if you want to call it, teach kids how to, it's almost like a Minecraft where they teach kids how to defend and fight and destroy monsters and other things, but it also teaches them while they're doing this how to build armor and shields to make sure they're using the right iron and natural resources and what those burn things are. I don't even know because I'm not a chemist, right? But how to teach them about chemistry. And I sat through this demonstration and I was just blown away because there's never been that type of engagement when I was in school. And had there would be, I might not be an attorney. I might be trying to figure out how to solve cancer and be a chemist, but it just wasn't that engaging to me. The other game you might hear today is about entrepreneurship. And as they go through levels and conquer quests, they're building a skill set around how to run a business, how to do a business plan, and how to sell and market that plan in an innovative way. And it meets kids where they were. And what's important to me is that it doesn't hinder the teacher. It actually enhances the teacher's ability to connect with kids. And that's what we're trying to do, I think, in the education world and what we're trying to do as a society. I know we have a lot of work to do, but if education truly is the passport to the future, we have to figure out how to engage every kid. And if they are on their phones and on their computers, we have to figure out how to use it as an asset and a tool to engage them. And hopefully this program will do that. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions at this time for Senator Wayne? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any proponents for LB 787?
Morning,
Morning.
Chairman Merman and members of Education Committee. It's a pleasure to be here today and to advocate on behalf of this important initiative. My name is John Goodman. That is JOHN GOODMAN. And clearly I am not the celebrity that would make this committee hearing a lot more fun and entertaining. I am the Vice President of Governmental Affairs and Business Development for Plasma Games. Plasma Games is an educational technology company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of LB 787 and the opportunities it can provide to Nebraska students, teachers, and the workforce development pipeline. I want to particularly thank Senators Wayne, Slama, and McDonald for co-sponsoring and authoring this important piece of legislation. Plasma Games was founded by a gentleman named Hunter Moore after he saw firsthand the challenges companies working in industries such as aerospace, nanotechnology, robotics, pharmaceuticals, and others, had finding qualified Americans to fill STEM-related jobs. His solution was to create a first-of-its-kind 3D digital learning platform that teaches STEM learning standards through engaging game mechanics. Our platform maximizes the fusion of learning standards with engaging gameplay to provide real-world context around what students are studying in the classroom. And this application of real-world context has significantly helped to increase students' interest in STEM education. For example, Mr. Chairman, the platform spotlights Nebraska community colleges, Nebraska universities, Nebraska corporations, Nebraska jobs, so that students can see themselves studying in Nebraska, working in Nebraska, to build that workforce pipeline that drives economic growth right here in Nebraska. An independent study funded by the North Carolina Department of Commerce and analyzed by independent North Carolina State University researchers found that students who use plasma games are 5 times more likely to pursue a chemistry-related career than the control group, which did not use our platform. Also of note, that same study found a 19% increase in end-of-the-year test scores after just one time of 30 minutes of gameplay. And lastly, from the study, researchers found that 100% of teachers who use the Plasma Games platform wanted to continue using it in their classrooms. Members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, these are truly unprecedented learning gains. And in fact, what has enabled us as a company to win first place in the world in an international competition out of Athens, Greece, for the best learning game on the planet. We also won a National Science Foundation Award, beating out MIT, Caltech, and everyone else in the country. And as of 2021, we were recognized as the best educational technology company in North Carolina for the outcomes we were having on student achievement and the economy. Finally, it's worth noting that the platform has an integrated textbook with text descriptions and videos that explain science concepts in a conversational dialogue. In addition to the platform itself, we provide step-by-step teaching materials, study guides, worksheets, all resources that teachers need to effectively be a chemistry or STEM teacher on day one, even though they may not have a background in those fields per se.
The red light is on.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll invite you to finish up your thoughts.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Advancing LB 787 is an investment in Nebraska students, workforce, and economic development. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry to have gone to the red
No
light.
problem. Any questions for Mr. Goodman? Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. It's only morning still, isn't
Is
it?
it?
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
I represent District 45, and in my district is the largest Air Force base in the wing. And they're seeing, right, the workforce shortage.
Mhm.
So with this program, this type of education, help us develop the military, people that are going into the military to help build that workforce here in Nebraska.
Yes, ma'am. I believe it would. And as you are probably aware, North Carolina is a heavily dependent military state itself. It is one of our largest industries outside of agriculture. And so, in the national defense portion of this conversation, these future STEM graduates would take that training, that education to the military when it is time to develop things like hypersonic missiles. We are in conversations with the state of Kansas at the moment, and Wichita State University is in charge, and they won a federal grant to come up with the materials to build hypersonic missiles. And they are using the STEM curriculum to build those, the wrapping that goes around those missiles, because it's a chemistry-driven process. So they quickly got what we were trying to accomplish here. So yes, ma'am, there's a direct tie to what the curriculum provides, particularly to the military and our national defense.
Thank you. And I have one
Yes,
more
ma'am.
question. Is this type of education available in China, and are we going to be ahead of it with our competitor? Or can
So-
we compete?
The platform that we have developed is a first of its kind and only product that exists on the planet, which is why we won first place in the world in Greece. And we are an American company, and we do not do business with anybody that's outside the United States.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Mr. Goodman? Senator Walls?
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Can you just, you talked a little bit about how you're working with schools and teachers in this program. Can you just explain it a little bit more, what the process looks like?
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the question, Senator. So we partner with states and at the legislative level, sometimes the executive branch level, depending on the funding mechanism, because of the federal dollars have flowed through the executive branch recently. But the majority of the time with legislatures, and a pot of money is provided. In this case, I think LB 787 provides $5 million. We would then go in and submit an RFP to compete for the award of the grant. We would get a portion of that grant, and at that point, it would make the product available to all Nebraska middle school and high school students. It is an opt-in process. We strongly believe in local control. So every student, every district that wanted it in Nebraska could have it, and at no cost to those districts, because the state has paid the upfront cost for it.
Okay. So is it a program that would be used for a class, or is it per student? Like, is it an individual student who says, this is something I want to do? Or is it the teacher saying, this is a program I want to use for my
Yes, ma'am. And the answer is both.
Okay.
Some teachers have used it in place of like lab time, because the fact of the matter is that in today's age, there's not a whole lot of lab time, because blowing things up isn't cool anymore in the schoolhouse, which I get. It can be used as homework. It can be used as a group exercise. It's really a tool and a resource for teachers and how they choose to implement it in their classroom in alignment with their curriculum and their, schedule for the day of the semester. It's really up to them.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank
And
you.
we do hands-on training for all the teachers. So we'll go in and help them customize it to the lesson plans.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Any
ma'am.
other questions? Senator Breezy?
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, sir.
Any other companies utilize your business model here?
I don't know that I can speak to that and give you an answer that I'm willing to be confident in.
Okay. And you've already developed this program, and so essentially you would be providing what you currently have if you would receive a grant from the state here.
Yes, sir.
Do that, correct?
Other states are already using it. Nebraska is on our set of states to expand into this year.
Yes. How many other states?
We are currently in or pursuing 14 states, and that is in the last 18 months.
Okay. In or pursuing, which ones have you contracted with, or which ones are you in
Currently,
arrangement with?
certainly, yes, sir. Currently, North Carolina is on year 4. South Carolina is on year 3. Alabama is just signed on. Virginia, West Virginia are next. Missouri, Kentucky, and then for this year, we're looking at Kansas, Nebraska, Indiana, Tennessee.
If you were going to work with Nebraska, what size of grant would you target?
So we would be applying for 2 million out of the 5 million, and that's to cover the entire state, middle and high school students. Yes, sir.
Okay. And that would be annually?
Yes, sir. That's an annual license that gives children access to the platform. And it's just a log on with the username and a password that they create, and they use it at their, their disposal.
You would anticipate the cost for the following year to be comparable or to be the same?
It would be the same, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We would only increase the price if the state wanted more. Some states have said, we love this. We want you to build us the next wave of whatever direction the state is going. And we're in conversations with states on that. North Carolina is doubling their investment this year from 2.5 to 5 because they're taking what we've been doing and moving it further along. They've seen the results.
And how do you move it further along? What's left here?
So we would expand the product base and pick up more subjects that match to the curriculum as set by you guys / the department. So if, I don't know, physics, and I'm making this off the top of my head, was important, we would expand into a platform to cover physics that correlates with our current platform.
Okay.
That's focused mainly on the STEM.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? I have one. Your estimate of approximately 5 million for the state of Nebraska, so that would provide like one class for all students in the state? Is that?
Thank you.
Is that how you get that estimate? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our portion of the 5 would only be 2 that we would apply for. It wouldn't be the full 5. I think LB 787 allocates a pot of money of 5 to the department. We would then go and apply for 2 of that 5. I'm assuming there are other initiatives. I think you'll hear of one shortly that would also be interested in applying for that pot of money. However, at that point, the department we'd work with the department, of course, but we would allocate this product, this platform, to all the schools. Every school, every district, all across the state would have access to the product.
So
all they have to do is log on.
So it would be at every grade level, or just like chemistry and physics in high school level?
Well, it'd be middle school and high school. Every middle school, every high school student, because that is the age groups when the STEM curriculum really starts to kick in. Before that, you're not really taking the STEM career pathways.
And the teacher's device would interplay with the students' devices to, monitor how far each student has done with the game, or those types of things?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So the platform is designed to run on a Chromebook, which is the bare minimum. It can work on even something as simple as dial-up. I mean, that's hard to believe that still exists. But it does take some level of internet, but it could be the lowest of the lowest. And we did that purposefully because, North Carolina being our first state out of the gate, we have very rural parts of North Carolina, particularly in the mountainous areas where, internet is, in high demand and slow. There's a lot of work getting internet to those areas. So we wanted to make it not only available on a tool, a Chromebook, that, was quite frankly the least expensive for school districts and the most popular, but also to make sure that they could access the program with bare internet speed bandwidth.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Good? Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Other proponents for 787? Good morning.
Good morning. I am Pam Peterson, P-A-M-P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N, and I'm a teacher in Nebraska for over 20 years, both at York Middle School and Blair Middle School. I bring a unique skill set and experience to my career. As a high school student, I was able to do research at UNMC, giving me the vision that I could be successful in science. I had the pleasure of working at NASA's Kennedy Space Center as an educational intern for 2 summers. I've been a NASA Nebraska Space Ambassador for the last 10 years, as well as part of the inaugural class of the Nebraska Department of Education STEM Fellows. I was also honored to be awarded the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science. During my tenure at York Middle School, I was tasked with creating a semester-long STEM class for high-ability 8th grade students and a quarter-long STEM class for high-ability 7th grade students. I've also been a Nebraska Fellowship Coach, a pilot program last year we created for freshmen and sophomores in college trying to build the STEM pipeline for industry here in Nebraska. Due to all of these accomplishments, I feel qualified to address the needs for STEAM education in Nebraska. STEAM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, entrepreneurship, and mathematics. First, I believe we must address the issue with availability. In my experience, STEM or STEAM is not available to all. Typically, STEM programs are expensive, requiring resources, costly supplies, and of course, qualified teachers. Another trend I see is that some programs are only for high ability students as a way to challenge students. These students aren't always the ones with the best problem solving abilities. So how can we provide these opportunities for students in real world, meaningful ways so students can feel confident to pursue careers in these areas? LB 787 solves these problems by putting STEM into the hands of all Nebraska middle school and high school students. It provides a way not only to introduce the material, but to immerse students in STEM using gamification. The game-based learning platform has many benefits, the largest being its ability to engage students more effectively than traditional classwork. The engagement leads to higher retention and learning as an instant feedback and reinforcement. Gamified learning modules promote engagement by creating challenges and tracking users' progress as they learn. The rewards and challenges of gamified learning creates an environment in which students can learn how to apply the knowledge and skills they're gaining, giving students added confidence when asked to use these skills in the real world. The online format helps to level the playing field for all students as instructors need less training supplies and other resources. We need to make STEM happen for all of Nebraska students. LB 787 can make this happen and students achieve greater success. I encourage you to support LB 787, and I thank you for your time and all of your work.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Peterson? If not, thank you very much. Any other proponents for 787? Good morning.
Good morning. It's a little cold here. My name is Michelle Eberhard. I'm CEO and one of the founders.
Could you spell your name, please?
Absolutely. Michelle, Michelle, Eberhard, E, B as in boy, E-R-H-A-R-D. As the CEO and also one of the founders of the All Realms Corporation and subsidiaries, a Nevada entity formed in 2021. On behalf of Quest Academy, I am here to present to you, the committee members and the state of Nebraska, our curriculum. The Ultimate Business Quest. The Ultimate Business Quest is a fully gamified business program, bringing the 21st century youth into a fantastical world as an immersive gaming experience that translates their business fantasies into their entrepreneurial reality. Throughout our gaming course, students will learn to build teams, build business plans, build business startup checklists, learn personality profiling through a gamified way, gamified resume building, understand and conquer all their business fears, learn how to climb out of their own pit of excuses. Each lesson is designed as a game, as they are familiar with and can associate with to enhance their learning experience. Throughout their fantastical quests, they will learn all business do's and don'ts, prepare them for the corporate and entrepreneurial world. Ultimate Business Quest has a fully customizable leaderboard and reporting for schools, districts, and classes based off of your specific needs. Our curriculum we have developed incorporates Nebraska business and entrepreneurial standards. We have developed the curriculum into 2 semesters with 3 CTE credits each. Our platforms allows us to scale quickly and efficiently for the entire state. How we launch our program is through a gamified assembly that will excite the youth to invite them to take the course. Our company will also work with each school, making the experience a fun and seamless launch. We also provide support to all the teachers if the curriculum is incorporated in the schools, or we guide the students through the curriculum with our accredited teachers, whichever the state chooses. Our curriculum, technology, and gaming app work in conjunction with each other to provide students with a fantasy gaming experience along with the traditional gamified curriculum. We are registered as a Google and Apple developer, owning our own code, servers, and IP. Our team has over 120 collective years experience in business, entrepreneurship, technology, and education. We work together with schools to enhance education for business and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for Ms. Eberhard? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. You mentioned something that I didn't think about through the testimony, and that was team building and how you work with other people and personality profiling. Can you talk a little bit about how that could be used? In what ways that could be used, I guess?
Thank you. That's actually my funnest answer. So through the archetypes, are you a warrior, a wizard, a bard, and a jester? Something that kids can relate to when they go into that more fantastical world. And how they develop and build teams is we will have them understand who they are, who they're showing up as, and then build a team around each archetype, because every single person has a completely different personality. And how you work together in a team, especially in business, is a diversified team. Not all warriors should be in one business, not all jesters should be in one business, otherwise it would be a little lopsided. So we teach them the balance of business, and they get to choose who's on their team to build an actual business throughout the course.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thanks for your testimony here today. So yours is business focused then, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
And what grades, if you were going to present this to the state, what grades would you suggest that we target with your
Yes.
program?
Thank you. 9 to 12,
9 to 12. And for how many months out of the year?
a full school year, 2 semesters.
Okay. So if I did the math on that, our 5 million here wouldn't go very far with your program, probably.
That would be pretty accurate.
Because you're,
Yeah.
you're suggesting $5 per
$5
student per month,
Mhm.
$60 $60 a year. We probably have 28,000 kids per grade roughly, and you're talking 4 grades.
It would be good, especially with the current budget in place, to just start with 11 and 12, because they are coming into that workforce soon. And regardless if they are an entrepreneur and going down that path or corporate, it's actually designed for both because of the resume building and how to work together in teams.
So if we're going to prioritize our dollars, you would suggest grades 11 and 12.
Absolutely.
But it'd
And
be a
then we can
12-month
expand.
program, though, or a
You're
12-month
correct.
commitment.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
very well.
Any other questions for Ms. Eberhard? I have one. Many parents and teachers feel like their kids are on their devices too much. And I know these programs are designed to meet the kids where they are, but at the same time, I think they're also, of course, kids are doing their work, they're going to be on their devices more with the programs. How would you address that?
I love that. Thank you, Senator. There is a beautiful balance, and it's also with work as well. And we call it the BPR. Balancing your BPR as your business, your personal relationship. And one of the fundamental problems of business owners, and we now see it in our children now starting to come up, is that we're so consumed when we go home. We're so consumed on our devices. We're so consumed in work. We can't shut it off. So one of our biggest, actually one of my biggest passions in the entire gaming app is that BPR. And so we teach the kids how to balance their day without being on the device all the time, is that they're actually setting the checklists and they actually can determine how much they're spending in each portion of their life. And with this program, it also brings it into reality. So they learn it inside the game, but then they also have to apply it outside without a device.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Eberhard? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Other proponents for 787? Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, Senators. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Kathy Cope, Kathycope. I've been overseeing the Quest Academy's curriculum, the Ultimate Business Quest, with a master's degree in education and one in special education and 20 years experience creating, editing, approving textbooks, curriculum, and teaching. My expertise focuses in the development and adaptation of curriculum for students who perform below grade level or the unmotivated student who struggles with behaviors that interfere with their learning. The Ultimate Business Quest curriculum provides the following for business and entrepreneurial Nebraska standards. It guides youth how to start, operate a mock enterprise with teams or individually in a fun story form gamification. While playing the games, they learn how to apply academic knowledge such as accounting, record keeping, and economics. It guides them through the development of career readiness skills. Playing the game provides management and critical thinking skills that can be applied throughout the lot in your life and in employment, including entrepreneurialism. Some of the topics that are covered are marketing, sales, financing, record keeping, budgeting, communication, customer service, and decision making. They experience that successful entrepreneurs take calculated risks based on demographic research and relevant information throughout the course. Gamification for youth to develop a business plan and a portfolio to be used when they leave the classroom. This enhances creativity, innovation, and problem solving. This business quest is fully gamified and a business program with learning through story form that captivates the students while having fun and learning business skills at the same time. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Cope. Any questions from Ms. Cope? Senator Breeze?
Chairman Merman, and thank you for your testimony here today. Who did you say you were with again?
With the CEO, Ultimate Business Quest.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from Ms. Cope? If not, thank you very much. Any other proponents for LB 787? Any opponents for 787? Anyone wish to testify in the neutral position? If not, Senator Wayne, you're welcome to close. While he's coming up, we've got 3 proponents, no opponents, and no neutral. Proponents are Deborah Brisson, Jeannie McClure, and Anika Brown.
Thank you. And I'll be quick. When I think about the grant, Senator Breezy, as far as the numbers question, I picked 5 million because it seemed safe that we could find somewhere to start a pilot program. As you heard, there's different ways. I think all these companies being in tech, at least the 2 here, different ways you can do the billing, you can do per student. And if you did per student, obviously that would be significantly less because maybe there's only 500 students who start off using it versus the entire state of 100,000. So there's different ways, and I think that'll be up to the grant guidelines to make sure they write it differently and all these proposals come out. There might be some concerns about, displacing teachers. I think that's kind of where I heard some questionings going. I could sit down with NSEA and anybody and make sure we strengthen the language. If that's not the intent, this is supposed to be a tool. We are not looking to replace anybody. We are trying to make particularly rural Nebraska, and even in some of the OPS schools where teachers are trying to engage in these chemistries and type engineering and STEM research and areas that they find ways to engage in. So we're just trying to use this as a tool. The grant, I think, will allow for a lot of flexibility that maybe there's a company out there that I don't know about. I actually just happened to stumble across these 2 companies, but there could be other companies who are doing STEM that would obviously apply. So that's why the 5 million came from, was based off of I think it's an easy number that this committee can do to start innovation and start engineering and start this entrepreneurship aspect of it. But if you look at our clusters as a state, talk about biotech with the university and the amazing research they do there, we are actually importing a lot of people because we as a state aren't growing enough in this field. You look at Offutt Air Force Base, Senator Sanders was talking about, again, we are bringing people here, but we're not building enough around that cluster to keep people here. So after they get done with the military, they leave. You look at agribusiness. We got Valmont. We got Lindsay. These are some of the biggest irrigation companies in the world who they have huge innovation around rusty. When you talk about third world, the water and how it rusts the pipes and trying to do innovation around that kind of stuff. That's all chemical. That's all engineering. And again, many of their research and development are not here in the state, even though they have a big presence or headquartered in the state. We have to start developing more workforce around the STEM and around innovation. And that's why this bill is so important. So again, this is just a pilot program. I think we can put a sunset vision on it till we come back in 5 years, which I won't be here to see if it's still working or not. But it's a way to just engage kids at their level and see if we can move the needle on the number of engineers and scientists and people who are in this innovation type field and see if we can increase that population dramatically. So that's the purpose of this bill. And I look forward to working with anybody on any amendments that need to get this done.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Any questions for Senator Wayne? Senator Albright?
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thanks for bringing this. I'm very intrigued by it. Do you see the ESUs taking this and taking it across Nebraska, or would the Department of Education be overseeing?
Right now, it's going to the state board as a grant. One, I want to make sure we have public oversight of it, just to make sure that we have somebody accountable, somebody who's elected to make sure this grant is going the right way.
When you say public oversight, meaning who?
The State Board of Education would oversee it right now. Initially when I wanted to bring this bill, I wanted to figure out how to give it to the school districts. But again, I'm thinking we're setting up a dynamic where some school districts may not be able to afford it for whatever reason. So I wanted the state to step in and pay it. And so I don't care who it goes to as far as the entity. I just want to make sure the state covers the costs and we invest in our children's future.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Wayne? If not, thank you very much, Senator Wayne, and that will close the hearing on LB 787. And I will turn the committee over to the capable hands of our Vice Chair, Albright.
Thank you. Okay, we're open for LB 800 at this time. Senator Merman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright and members of the committee. Today, I'm on this side of the desk to introduce LB 800 to amend the Superintendent Pay Transparency Act. I am a firm believer that Nebraska has great students, great boards, educators, and administrators. Every school board in Nebraska has the responsibility of hiring a superintendent. School boards look for a superintendent with bold vision and the ability to lead and represent not only their school, but also their community. These are important jobs, but as you talk to citizens, it quickly becomes clear that while most school districts set their administrators' salaries at a fair and reasonable rate, some do not. A few districts seem to be paying their superintendents a rate that is out of touch with the rest of the state. For example, here in Lincoln in 2021, Superintendent Steve Joel had a base salary of $334,515. When you add benefits, his total compensation package was $530,529. I'll say that again, $530,529. This salary put Dr. Joel and Lincoln with 41,747 students at the same pay level as the superintendent of Chicago's public schools, where Pedro Martinez made just $5,500 more in base salary than Dr. Joel, while overseeing 340,658 students, over 8 times the students and roughly the same salary. Just doesn't sound right to most Nebraskans, especially when you consider the difference in cost of living. I am not saying that we shouldn't pay superintendents well. They clearly have lots of serious responsibilities and have had years of training and experience and deserve a fair wage that reflects that. What I am trying to do with LB 800 is to bring the outliers back in line with the rest of the state. LB 800 will cap Nebraska's superintendent's salaries and benefits at 5 times the salary and benefits of a first-year starting teacher. I believe this will help with some administrative bloat and, more importantly, provide an incentive for administrators to prioritize teacher salary increases. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Any questions from the committee? Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Quick question that popped in my mind during your opening. Would you be in support of a measure that would apply kind of the same line of thinking in the private sector, that you would tie, for example, CEO compensation to that of the lowest paid employee?
No, I don't think I would. The private sector, is the private sector.
Mhm.
This is the public sector, so these salaries are paid with tax money. So I think it's a different situation.
Okay, and then just to follow up on that, then, would you apply this type of policy to all aspects of government? Say, for example, cabinet leadership at the state level down to the lowest level employee in that agency?
Well, I think typically the lowest level employee is probably not overcompensated, but at the top
Agreed.
levels, I would certainly consider that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Senator Conrad. Seeing none, we'll wait for it to come back up. Looking for proponents of Bill LB 800. Proponents. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Sarah Freeoff, S-A-R-A-F-R-E-E-O-U-F. I live in Crete, Nebraska. I've been married to a math and physics teacher for 56 years. He taught for 50 of that. I have been a music teacher my whole career. Back in the 70s, I ran for State Board of Education. I also was a lobbyist to help save the small Class 2 and 3 schools after I finished my 7 years of 400 kids a day teaching. Long story short, I served on the ESU school board for 3 terms, 12 years. I drove from Crete to Milford faithfully. At that time, teacher training, special ed, and technology were the ways that the ESUs helped the schools. There was the beginning of distance learning and some co-op purchasing too that I didn't remember till I typed this. As other conservatives got elected to the ESU board, we became more aware of the bloated spending and the huge ESU cash reserve. We voted to pay off the loan on the ESU building, and thus we lowered the mill levy. We tried to hold the line on our administrators' salaries, but the ESU 5 board seemed to always bump up their administrators' salary to make other ESUs very aware of the upward trend. The salaries of all 19 ESU administrators must be made transparent. That's why I'm in favor of this bill. Yes, I'm totally in favor of capping these ESU administrators' salaries. I also think that a complete and thorough audit of each of our Nebraska's 19 ESUs should be mandatory in the process of capping and making these salaries transparent. My reasoning for this is based on the opening meeting violations that we witnessed. The ESU
1 to 19 administrators were meeting all over the state for their dinner planning sessions that included moving money around. Only board members have the legal status to move tax funds around. The proof of all this corruption went to the Nebraska Ombudsman, the Nebraska governor, and the Nebraska auditor at the time. But sadly, a state senator got a bill passed which basically legalized everything these ESU administrators did. Administrators even got a new name. Instead of being called the ESUAA, they became the ESUCC, which is the ESU Coordinating Council. So in December of 2008, most of the ESU board members, including me, walked out and resigned. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Do you have any questions? Senator Lenahan?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Frioff, for being here, and thank you for your years of teaching and your husband's years of teaching. So you bring an interesting subject here, because I know that there are a lot of meetings which seem by administrators, not just the issues, administrators, they don't seem to be open to the public. There's no press, there's no elected officials there. Is that your experience, that there's several of those meetings going on? So you're saying there was a law passed that allowed them to do it?
Basically, they got their tickets out of jail because of what a senator decided to do. And if you have any further questions, I talked to my cohort last night because we were raising kids at the time. We were busy. And I said, just jog my mind. And she said, I'll email you. And so I didn't make copies of this, but I have her information. I guess it's back with my other things of what she experienced. She wrote her own thoughts down about that. And she was more into the legal aspects of it. We wanted to deal with it at the time, but they smoothed it all over. And our administrator, actually, we fired him because he was moving funds. And we hired a different administrator. That probably would have been about, maybe 2004, 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Lenahan. Any other questions? Thank you for being here. Any other proponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, do we have any opponents that would like to speak?
Thank you, Senator Albright, members of the Education Committee. My name is Colby Koash, C-O-L-B-Y-C-O-A-S-H. I represent the Nebraska Association of School Boards. And I'd like to focus my comments today on three topics here. The first is local control. The second is free market. And the third is transparency. As you know, the School Boards Association is very concerned about local control, and this bill really does erode the control that boards have over the compensation, setting the compensation that meets the needs of their district. Here's why that's important. The free market is really alive here in Nebraska. Boards have to face the same market pressures the businesses face, and they have to offer compensation accordingly. There are factors across the state that go into decisions about compensation that range from the distance, from metro areas, from the size of the district, to housing and daycare. Those are all factors that have to be considered. Salary and benefits is just one, but it's the one that boards have the control over. The supply and demand of superintendents in Nebraska has really changed, particularly over the last decade. So let me give you an example. In 2018, the Gothenburg School District had 22 candidates to consider for their superintendent vacancy. So they had 22 interested candidates from which to choose their district leadership. 5 years later, when there was turnover in that position, there were only 9 candidates. So the supply of superintendents went down, the demand remained the same, could even say increased, and that does put pressure on the cost of that position. Salaries for superintendents, unlike any other school staff, are discussed in open session. They are offered in full view of the public. And once these superintendent contracts are finalized, they are posted and put out there, both in the NDE's website and on the school's website. So the compensation package for that one position alone is posted and available for the public to see. I'd encourage the committee to really consider the parallels, right, of a superintendent to the private sector, since that was brought up. Superintendents really serve a role that is more akin to a CEO role, right? They are the top leader in a large district with a lot of employees and a lot of customers. And I think if you make that comparison, you'll see why compensation is what it is. I'll close by saying that, hiring and the evaluation of a district's top leader is one of the most important roles that a board of education does. And they have to be free to consider all these factors when they discuss and offer compensation to their leaders. And so arbitrary limits will firmly limit that duty. And for that reason, we would oppose this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Clash, any questions from the committee? Senator Linehan?
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright. So, free market. You're not in a free market world. I mean, that's not a question. I don't see free market. As far as being arbitrary, it's not arbitrary. It's 5 times what a beginning teacher makes. So it's connected to where we have a shortage, a real shortage. So I have watched over the last several weeks as superintendents have been hired. And I don't recall, do you recall any of the schools that were hiring superintendents having less than 3 finalists for the job?
There have been several districts where there have been less than 3 finalists for a job.
Several?
Across the state, yes.
Okay, well, I would like a list of those that had several less than 3, because the ones I've seen lately all had 3 finalists, meaning those were after they went through all their papers. So for instance, how many applied to Lincoln Public Schools that just hired, a year ago? Do you know how much the governor's salary is?
I believe it's 85,000.
Actually, it's 105,000.
105. I'm maybe thinking of the state treasurer or something.
And the chief justice, who is a lawyer, attorney,
About 180,000, somewhere around there.
192,000. So you see a conflict at all between the fact that the governor and the chief justice, the chief justice is paid half what a superintendent of schools paid?
I think they're 2 different roles, 2 different jobs. The pool of applicants for those are varied. The legislature here makes the decision on the compensation for those offices, and boards of education make those decisions on the compensation for their leaders.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Any other questions? Senator Breezy?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Albright. Thank you for your testimony here today. Have you tried to calculate, I perhaps should have asked Senator Mervin this, but if you tried to calculate if this bill would pass, what kind of dollars are we talking about here? What would the savings be to the local property taxpayers?
Well, I think that the savings would be dependent on the district, right? So,
Sure.
So we do track superintendent compensation across the state. So I can tell you what, because it's out there publicly, I can tell you what every superintendent is making. How this bill affects each of those districts, I haven't made that calculation.
Haven't tried to estimate what the overall cumulative effect would be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Anyone else? Senator Walls?
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. I think that, I may be wrong about this, but I think that one of the most important things about being a Nebraskan is having local control. You mentioned that there are a few ways that the superintendent's salary is on a website, the department website, the local school website, is that correct?
Yes, the Superintendent Transparency Act was passed when I was here in 2010, and it mandates that contracts for superintendents be sent to NDE's website, which is, I believe, publicly available, and then also posted on the district's website to be in compliance with the superintendent transparency.
Okay. So if somebody doesn't agree, let's just say somebody doesn't agree with the superintendent's salary, can you go through the process for me? Has it ever happened? What does the process look like?
Well, I can tell you that when a district is going through the process of hiring a superintendent, all of the deliberations, the discussion about candidates, now there are some protections to protect the reputation of names, but all of the salary discussions, the deliberations are all held in open session. And so the contracts discussions are held in open session. Those are often also subject to public comment, not just at that meeting, but subsequent meetings. So school districts with their superintendents, unlike any other position within the school, have to be exactly transparent. I mean, they have to put the contract out there, and contracts vary. They don't just include compensation. They can include stipends for health insurance, housing, those kinds of things, which are very important in a lot of districts because of the competitive nature. I mean, it's very difficult to find superintendents in certain parts of the state. It's difficult to find a person who might want to go, who's from a urban area and want to go to particularly a rural area with their families. And so compensation has to reflect that need to go to attract that qualified candidate to take that position in that kind of a district. And I would say that's something that we've been monitoring, and it's been more and more challenging. And the example I gave with Gothenburg, and I wouldn't consider that to be a rural district, but that's often a driver in the increased cost is a compensation package which will entice that person to live in a community which maybe they're not from, not used to, but want to take on that responsibility.
Sure. Okay, and I just want to clarify, you said something about open session. So when they are considering a few people to be their superintendent of the school, anybody can come to that hearing or that session, and they will hear exactly what the salaries would be, the benefits. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the discussion in open session will be around the contract. And I know in some districts you'll hear particular numbers, and others, there'll be, the process is just like what happens in the private sector. You choose the best candidate. The board discusses who that candidate should be. They will typically then authorize the board president to call and offer the contract to that candidate. And then that candidate comes back. Those discussions are held. There's typically a welcome for a new superintendent, but all of those things are held in open session. And certainly that contract is available to the public. And whether it's during a meeting like that or future meetings during public comment, you'll frequently hear public feedback on that compensation. And that was the reason that bill was passed in 2010. It was so that the public would know.
Okay, all right, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Walls. Any other questions? One more.
I just want to make sure I understood you right. Thank you. Vice Chair, all right. Gothenburg did have 9 candidates.
The second time, yeah. In 2023, they had 9 candidates. In 2018, which was the previous time they had chosen, they had 22.
But it wasn't like they didn't have any candidates.
That's correct.
Like we don't have any, we're missing teachers.
Yeah, my point in that illustration was the fact that the supply, and I think this is not any different than what's happened in the private sector. We've got a generation who's going out of the workforce. We have less people going into teaching, which means less people going into administration. So
what is do you remember what the Gothenburg School District paid their superintendent?
I think so. I can tell you, I don't remember what it was. I can tell you what it is.
Okay.
I mean, because I don't know what it was in
That's
2018.
fine. What is it?
Gothenburg is $173,000.
So beginning teachers, probably 35,000.
I would say it's, a beginning teacher would be around that, yes.
Well, if you include their package, it'd be far more than that.
Yes.
right? Okay. So that wouldn't be that far off, would it?
It's in the range, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here. Any other opponents for LB 800? Good morning.
Good morning, Vice Chair Albright, members of the Education Committee. My name is Kyle McGowan, KYLE-MCGOWAN. And today I'm representing the Nebraska Council of School Administrators, the Nebraska State Education Association, and the Greater Nebraska Schools Association. And I did appreciate Senator Merman's introduction. I think he does realize the challenges of the job. I would like to just respond to a couple of comments of comparing the LPS superintendent to the Chicago superintendent. I would argue maybe they didn't pay enough to the Chicago superintendent, because the LPS superintendent certainly had a very good record of kids learning. And in terms of maybe capping the salary of superintendents in an effort to raise the salary of teachers, I would reverse the bill and say no teacher gets paid less than 1/5 of the superintendent. Every superintendent wants to have the highest paid staff to recruit. Teachers are, as we all know, the fundamental reason why kids succeed. But as I'm also representing here the NSEA, I think they would say no teacher wants to work for a bad leader. Recently there was a tragic incident, I don't know what state, of a 6-year-old shooting a first grade teacher. You remember seeing that? Now, I'm only getting the news reports. I don't know anything more than you do. On day 2, they fired the superintendent. Maybe well-deserved. I don't know. But the superintendent, no truer words than Harry Truman of the buck stops with that person. The Nebraska Superintendent Transparency Act that you've been talking about, this is off of their NDE website. I think it would be good for you to take a look at that. So as it's passed around here, it is just bullet points that are required. So at least 3 days before the board meeting, you must publish or post amendments to the contract of the meeting coming up. Within 2 days of the contract, you have to post and publish what that contract is. Consequences for not doing that are withholding state and local funds. It's a very, very transparent process. Now, one can argue about who's overpaid and not overpaid. I would say, it is surprising to me that the governor's paid $180,000, but yet we spend millions on campaigns. I look to you people as being the most underpaid public service people in the state. I can tell you the pressure of being a school superintendent, of every time you hear a siren go off, of whether that's going to impact one of your students, of the expectation to handle any tragedy that's happening in your community, and still with the goal of trying to have kids learn. COVID was a perfect example of how important it was for leadership. Superintendents were trying to get kids back in the classroom because that's where they're safe and that's where they need to be. Every decision they made was questioned. It was wrong to somebody and it was right to someone else. It's a important job. It's a job that I feel proud that I have had. I was superintendent at Crete for 10 years. But the stress is part of why the salary is so high. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for being here and your testimony. Any questions? Senator Lenahan?
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright. So back to our first testifier that was a proponent, Mrs. Freoff. Does you represent the Nebraska School Administrators
Correct.
Association? Do you have meetings where there's no public or press present?
Absolutely. We're a private organization.
And how often do you have those meetings?
Are you talking, I was at the office today, meetings with whom?
Other superintendents. I mean,
Yes.
I think her point was that there's meetings of which, when we meet, we have to have public, has to be aware that we're meeting. We can't meet behind closed doors. We can't have, so do you face any of those same kind of, when a group of 20 superintendents gather to talk about how they're going to, whether they're going to just say at the hearing, education hearing?
Right.
When you have those meetings, is there any press present or can the public be there?
No, our membership is not bound by any open meeting laws. We can meet with our membership just like any other organization can meet with their membership.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Lenahan. Any other questions? Senator Walls? Sure. Okay, thank you. You know what? One thing that you brought up, and I'm so glad that you did, was just the responsibility of the superintendent when it comes to community. It reminded me of our superintendent in Fremont and how, during the flood and then COVID, really was the leader in the community that brought people together. So it's not just being a superintendent, it certainly is being the leader, a community leader. With that said, I just want to talk a little bit, I want to go back to the transparency and what I talked with Colby a little bit about, and how, the public is aware when these meetings are happening regarding the salary of the superintendent. When I think about everything that our superintendent does for our school, as well as our community, I kind of feel like the public is invited to say, yes, we're going to hire this guy or we're going to retain this guy at this salary or not. Does that make sense? I mean, when you have open sessions regarding, it's almost like the public is also saying, has a say in who they're going to hire.
Yeah, I have been involved in a few superintendent searches, and there's always interviews with the public in terms of when you're trying to narrow down from your 4 or 5 finalists or how many that you have. I would say, and I appreciated, the comments from the original proponent. Not everybody agrees, okay? And that's part of the nature of a public school superintendent too, is you have a wide continuum of opinions, very strong on each end. But you folks would be the perfect example, as well as you don't always get what you want. You vote and the majority wins. Now that leaves some people unhappy. But the best way to handle an unhappy salary dispute with a superintendent would be to join that school board. And guess what? You still might not get what you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Walls. Senator Breezy?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Albright. Thank you for your testimony here today. But you said earlier the NSCA opposes this bill, correct?
Correct.
If this bill was put in place, wouldn't that tend to put upward pressure on teacher salaries?
You were on the school board, weren't you, Senator? Sure. The teacher salaries are set as a negotiated agreement that is overseen by the Commission of Industrial Relations. So the two are not connected. However, as I said before, if you wanted to connect the two, why wouldn't you say no teacher gets paid less than 1/5 of the superintendent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard you say that earlier, but it seems to me that if schools are alarmed by their inability to pay superintendents what they otherwise would have paid, they're going to have to raise teacher salaries to get it there. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the NSCA would oppose this.
You all know the labor shortage, whether it's nurses or teachers, and superintendents are not immune to that labor shortage as well. We're going to have to be paying more money to teachers in this state. So we're going to go through this stage of reducing the certification, but eventually teachers are going to have to get paid more money if we want a quality experience for our kids.
Do you ever look at U.S. Census Bureau data relative to education spending?
To overall spending?
Yes, but in particular, per pupil spending on general administration costs?
I haven't, I'm sorry.
Okay. Would you disagree with me if I suggested that our general administration costs are roughly 24% higher than the national average, according to the 2020 U.S. Census Bureau?
If you say it, I believe you.
Well, thank you. Anyway, thank you for your testimony.
You bet.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Do we have any other opponents that wish to speak?
I have a new knee that takes some getting used to. Good morning. And,
Good morning.
Vice Chair Albrecht, committee members, particularly Senator Lanahan, my own senator. I appreciate the chance to be here and to speak to you, and you're spending time to hear all of us. My name is Ted Stillwell, TED-STILWILL. I'm an elected board member for Education Service Unit 3, which is located in La Vista, Nebraska. I'm representing District 2 in that ESU election, and that includes Elkhorn and some of Millard. ESU 3 is the largest ESU in the state of Nebraska with 5,400 staff, serving over 86,500 students in 18 school districts. Our ESU board has fiscal responsibility for $26.5 million annually. My own experience includes being a teacher. Incidentally, I got to be a teacher through what you discussed earlier as an apprenticeship program, although a long time ago. I've also been a school district and a state education administrator. I was the director of the Iowa Department of Education, which is comparable to the Commissioner of Education in Nebraska. I've had about 32 years of education administrative experience. And when I put all that together, it leads me to come here today and submit my testimony in opposition to LB 800. Elected board members are tasked with recruiting and hiring highly skilled school administrators and ESU administrators, as you've been discussing. And I'll skip a few pieces because you've already been discussing how that process works and how serious that responsibility is. Just to zero in and match some of what you've been talking about earlier, ESU 3 board has recently completed the evaluation of our administrator, and I'm on the compensation committee that will recommend to the full board the compensation of our administrator next month. So this is all pretty timely. We will consider his performance. We will consider the success of the ESU 3's services to students, teachers, and districts. And we'll also look at the status of our strategic plan, which is pretty important to us. We will also carefully consider data on compensation for other education leaders in our immediate area. I was happy to read yesterday and hear this morning about your concern for the critical shortage of teachers and the role that adequate compensation plays in the retaining of good teachers. The shortage of teachers is not limited to teachers. It's also a shortage of administrators, and you've already discussed some of that. I really want to say that as a member of a local board, I don't think we need the restrictions you're suggesting in LB 800. I think we have the fiscal responsibility to do what we need to do and to act wisely on behalf of the general public. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stillwell. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Any other opponents?
Good morning, committee members. Thank you for this time to address the body. My name is Don Mayhew, D-O-N-M-A-Y-H-E-W, and I'm the president of the board of the Lincoln Public Schools Board of Education. I appreciate Senator Merman looking at a wide range of education issues, but I do not believe that a one-size-fits-all approach to superintendent contracts is the best approach. LB 800 includes a provision that sets the maximum superintendent's 260-day salary and benefits at 5 times that of a first-year teacher on a 180-day calendar. In setting a static rate such as this, the bill does not recognize the scope and scale of superintendents' work in different districts. Other mathematical formulas could also have been used. For example, one measure could have been a certain amount per student. Right range of superintendent salaries divided by student enrollment in Nebraska could be as large as over $2,000 per student to under $10 per student. Other measures could have been a certain amount per school building or a certain ratio of the budget or square miles of the district, but all of those methods miss the necessity of each community, through their school board, determining what is right for their superintendent. The most important role of a school board is recruiting, hiring, and evaluating its superintendent. In the current economic environment, with the nationwide shortage of superintendents and with the average tenure for superintendents continuing to shrink, adding an additional arbitrary measure disconnected from the professional demands of the superintendent only exacerbates the existing problem of hiring and retaining superior school leaders. Just like when seeking to determine teacher salary ranges, LPS is not measured against an artificial standard, but is in part compared to other similar communities. For example, places like Madison, Wisconsin, Des Moines, Iowa, Shawnee Mission, Kansas, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Anoka, Hennepin, Minnesota, among others, to find a salary range that matches similar work in similar geographic regions, i.e. market-driven. Superintendents wishing to come to Nebraska are expecting a similar thoughtfulness in our approach to them. So school boards have been asked by their communities to find the right superintendent and to pay them in a manner that is appropriate for the demands of the work in that community. Over my 20 years on the board, I've been part of the process of hiring 3 superintendents. Each experience included collaborative work with the community and the board to identify the important traits and experience of a potential superintendent. Those experiences and traits were based on the work that was going to be demanded of the superintendent, and our contractual agreement with the new superintendent reflected those demands. I would note that there are smarter people in the district than me who are much better at math than I am, but when this first was introduced, I sharpened my crayons and did a little napkin math. A year ago, Lincoln was in the middle of a process to hire our new superintendent, and by my napkin math, if this law had been in place, it would have potentially priced out 3 of our 4 finalists, including the person that we ended up hiring, Dr. Gosman, who was the overwhelming choice not only of our board, but of our community at the end of a very extensive process looking for a large amount of community input. Therefore, we cannot support a bill that, through an artificial measure disconnected from the work of superintendents, takes away the ability of local citizens and their school boards to select and contract with superintendents of their choice. For this reason, we oppose LB 800, and I would be happy at this time to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thanks for your time.
Any other opponents?
All right. Good morning, Vice Chair Albright, members of the education community. My name is Spencer Head, S-P-E-N-C-E-R-H-E-A-D. the president of the Omaha Public Schools Board of Education, representing the Omaha Public Schools today in opposition to LB 800, which would cap superintendent pay at 5 times the pay and benefits of a first-year teacher. So the Omaha Public Schools is the largest school district in the state, serving over 52,000 students. And with 8,500 combined full and part-time staff, we are also the third largest employer in the state of Nebraska. We are one of the largest school districts in the country, and nearly 80% of our students that we serve are living in high poverty. We also serve a large number of students who are English language learners, and over 20% of our students are enrolled in special education. The combination of all these factors makes the Omaha Public Schools relatively unique in the state of Nebraska. As a result, the Omaha Public Schools has a history of recruiting and selecting superintendents who have experience educating students that are similar to ours. To do that, we generally need to conduct a national search for our superintendent. And as you're aware, we are currently undertaking one of those searches right now. While we appreciate Senator Merman's efforts to promote transparency and accountability in our public school districts, this artificial cap on superintendent pay would limit our ability to recruit quality candidates in the future. We're aware of other states such as New Jersey that have adopted and subsequently repealed similar measures. While these are feel-good measures at the time of adoption, they have almost no savings for taxpayers and make it difficult to attract top quality superintendents to the state. As we enter the search for our next superintendent, we request that the committee not advance LB 800. And just listening to some of the questions that have been asked earlier, I did a little bit of math in my notebook here. Our superintendent package right now is 0.07% of our total budget. So if we were going to, equate that and figure out if this bill was enacted, what the savings would be per taxpayer, it's roughly 30 cents per taxpayer per year within the Omaha Public Schools. Right now we're in the middle of contract negotiations with our teachers union, and so while I can't speak to what the number is going to be, I can say that it's a very substantial and lucrative package that we're offering our teachers. I think the goal of everyone here is to get teachers paid more. I think that's what we all want. But at the end of the day, if we look at this with, say, a 3% growth cap or something like that, the package that we're offering to our teachers, we wouldn't be able to offer that in 1 year. It would take multiple years to put that into effect. And so, things like this, yeah, we want to pay our teachers more. We want that more in line. But this, at least in our opinion, isn't necessarily the right way to go about it. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Head. Do we have questions? Senator Linehan?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Albright. So if you had a 3% cap, you couldn't afford to increase teachers' pay?
We could not assuming that everything else stays stable and teacher pay is the only thing that grows within that. We could obviously increase it, just not at the rate that the rate that we would like to. Would be over that 3% per year. Yeah.
Okay. So is there, and I know you've been on the school board for a while now, is there possibility that maybe, back to Senator Breezy and how much we're a little out of whack with the rest of the nation on administrative costs, is there a possibility that we could do with fewer administrators?
I would say that we have a pretty slim administrative staff as is, and we can always take a look at where we're paying people.
How many employees, percentage of employees in OPS are administrators?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'll get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Linehan. Any other questions? Senator Breezy?
Vice Chairman Albright, thanks for being here today.
Thank
You've obviously done the math relative to your district, but just a ballpark, maybe I should ask Mr. McGowan this, but just ballpark, what would be the impact on superintendent salaries if this was in place, a percentage?
Yes, so it would.
Any guess or thought?
Ballpark percentage, I don't have. It would be her total package right now is $516,000. Total package for a first-year teacher right now is roughly $79,000. So we're about 6.5 times a first-year teacher. So it would be a reduction of $126,000 ballpark.
126 versus 5. But that's just relative to OPS. We don't know.
That's just us,
otherwise.
correct.
You don't have any guess otherwise. across
Correct.
the state.
Yep, that's just our district.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Do you have any other opponents?
Good morning, Senator Albright and members of the Education Committee. My name is Jack Moles. That's Jackmoles. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Rural Community Schools Association, also known as NERCSA. On behalf of NERCSA, I wish to speak in opposition of LB 800. The biggest concern that we have is that the intent, or maybe a better term might be outcome, of the bill is to take away local control from the locally elected Board of Education. As I read the bill, the existing law and then the bill, a few quotes I'd like to highlight here. In reference to a Class 4 district, it says, and we're talking about setting compensation for administrators, that such compensation as the Board of Education may determine, except then in reference to a Class 5 district, at such compensation as the board may deem just, except in reference to a Class 3 or 4 district, with such compensation as the board deems best, except, and then in reference to an educational service unit, shall fix the compensation of the administrator, except. What I believe, if this bill were to go forward and pass, what I believe the legislature would be telling this local school boards is, we trust you, but, or we trust you, except. One of the jobs of the locally elected Board of Education is to select the districts or the issue's chief administrator. That Board of Education knows what is needed in determining the compensation package that the administrator is to receive. That determination should properly be kept in the hands of the locally elected Board of Education. Another issue this bill seems to ignore is the fact that we are experiencing shortages in all levels of education. Districts are not only competing for dwindling numbers of teachers, but also for non-certificated staff, specialized staff, and administrators. NERCSA does provide a superintendent search service. The number of applicants, as Colby Koesch pointed out earlier from NASB, is that the numbers of applicants for most superintendent positions are getting smaller, not larger. Boards must have the latitude to provide a competitive compensation package for their chief administrator in order to compete with other districts. So in closing, we do not support LB 800 as we believe this usurps the authority of the locally elected Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moles. Any questions? Senator Lenahan?
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright. Do you have a lot of NERCSA schools that are paying their superintendents over $200,000 a year?
No.
I didn't think so. Any?
I'd have to go and check. There may be a couple, but I don't believe so.
I didn't think so.
Now, you're talking about just salary, right?
Well, the
Or
salary.
total
and-
compensation?
It'd be good if you could just provide what NERCSA is paying their superintendent.
Yeah, I'd say likely not.
That's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lenahan. Any other? Nope. Okay. we're
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Welcome.
Good morning, committee. My name is Justin Knight, JUSTINKNIGHT. I know we're butting up against the lunch hour, so I'll try and be brief here. I'm a private practice attorney in Lincoln, Nebraska. I work with a fair number of school districts across the state. One of my responsibilities is to work on contracts when a new superintendent is hired or when a board wants to adjust its current contract to make sure it conforms with the law. I wanted to point out a couple of concerns that I have for your consideration about LB 800. The first is that the bill purports to modify the Superintendent Pay Transparency Act, but the superintendent contract provisions are actually under the Tenure Act in Chapter 79. It gets confusing because under 79824 paragraph 3, there's a specification that a superintendent is covered under the Tenure Act, but is always considered a probationary employee, which gets complicated because as someone protected under the Tenure Act, they have a rollover contract or a contract that automatically rolls over, which is further convoluted because under the Tenure Act, a superintendent can have a contract for up to 3 years. So that can get confusing pretty quickly, which is why I think if you look across the state at roughly 245 districts, you'll probably see somewhere between 245 or 230, whatever, different superintendent contracts because boards and contracts have negotiated those contracts. So many superintendents and boards have agreed to a rollover provision. And so one of the concerns that I wanted to raise today is the Nebraska Constitution's contract clause prohibits the impairment of any existing contract. When I look at this bill, there's a prohibition that the board may not enter into any contract with the superintendent on or after the effective date of this act. And I'm concerned that that may be impairing some of those contracts that automatically roll over or potentially would be amended. In 2017, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed changes that the Indiana legislature made to Indiana's Tenure Act and found that those changes, which aren't the same but are somewhat similar to these, violated Indiana's contract clause. So, and I'm happy to provide copies of those cases if the committee is interested. So that would be a concern. In addition to that, the concern that I wanted to raise as well is that on page 5, lines 26 through 31 are the bill's penalty provision, which would require the superintendent to forfeit or pay back any compensation received in excess of the bill. And I'm worried that that may violate the due process provision of the Constitution. In addition to that, one of the provisions of total compensation is defined as maximum cash payment for unused leave that's accumulated. Under the Wage Payment and Collection Act, it is required. The Nebraska Supreme Court has said twice that accrued but unused leave must be paid out upon the ending of employment. In addition, there are laws that require certain retirement contributions. So I'm not sure how it's going to work practically where the board has to get money back that the board is legally obligated to pay. As noted earlier, the CIR has the order to modify teacher compensation. And so I don't know how that will work with the superintendent contract if the CIR changes teacher compensation in the middle of the contract. And so those are some of the high point cases that I wanted to mention. And again, I'm happy to provide those cases to the committee if you'd like, but I didn't want to unsolicited give you a bunch of court cases if because I know you're all busy. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. Any questions? Yes, I just have a couple.
Okay.
A few of those cases might be in order to give to the education chair and his staff.
Yep.
Is it customary to, if you say you work with these school boards, correct, to help them with all of the information that they have to take into consideration before they hire? When they talked about the gentleman from Lincoln with his high salary and the scores in that particular area while he was actually overseeing, is that something that goes into the consideration when they're out looking to actually increase math, science, reading scores throughout his tenure? If you say they only get like a 3-year contract usually. And do they open that contract? So I'm asking a few things. And do they open that contract within that 3-year period if there happens to be a rise in scores for that particular district?
I'm not sure that I can really answer the background of it. My role is typically limited to, this is what we have in mind. Is it legal? If so, prepare language that we can put in the contract. So I'm rarely privy to any of the negotiations back and forth other than this is what we want.
Okay, thank you. Senator Breezy?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Thank you for your testimony here today. These rollover contracts, are they signed then annually? Is there a written document annually that's re-signed every year? Or is it an oral situation? I mean, a contract to begin with the assumption that it continues on?
It depends on the contract. There are some contracts where the superintendent has to give notice by a certain date that they would like to go another year, and then the board will vote whether to extend that. They may do a contract addendum to an existing contract. So I don't know that I can answer for everybody. I think you'd have to look at the specific contract and what that contract requires.
Not a very good analogy, but it sounds like an oral year-to-year lease to me that I can change or modify anytime I want. But anyway, and to be clear here, relative to the CIR, was mentioned earlier also, well, the teachers' negotiations are controlled by the CIR. Well, they aren't, to be clear, they aren't controlled by the CIR as long as we are meeting any requirements set forth by the CIR. The school can do what they want. They can increase teacher salary and benefits as much as they want, regardless of the CIR saying, correct?
Yeah, so under 48.818.01, if the school and the teachers union can agree on pay for the following year, or compensation, I should say, compensation package, either can petition the CIR to review, and the CIR has the authority to enter an order either to get the teacher compensation within the 98.102. If neither side petitions to the CIR doesn't get involved. So if both sides are happy to be above 102, then that's not a problem.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Any other questions, Senator Conrad?
Thank you so much. I appreciated your testimony, and I think to Senator Albright's point, I was surprised that those issues weren't addressed in our legal memo on the measure. So I'm really glad that you brought those up, and I think the committee would be interested in learning more about those issues. But just to kind of maybe not push back or play devil's advocate, but just kind of think through the contract issue and the constitutional prohibition a little bit more. Essentially, as I'm reading this bill, which I'm skeptical of, but in essence, the legislature does have the ability and the right to say that from a contract perspective, like this is void as against public policy, right? And so that's kind of, I think, what proponents are trying to do without interference in like a perhaps specific contract provision. But we do that all the time, right? There's, of course, protections for the right to contract in individual contracts, but we do set standards all throughout our statute books. Like even if I wanted to contract with an employer, say for example, and I said, it's okay with me if you pay me less than minimum wage, I can't do that because it's void as against public policy as evidenced by other aspects of our law. Can you just tease that out a little bit?
Yeah, and I thank you for that, because that is.
It's been a long time since I sat in a contracts class, but yeah.
That's a good point that I want to clarify is I don't want anyone to take away that this entire bill is unconstitutional. I think the concerns that I foresee would be with existing contracts that superintendents and boards have already entered into. How the interplay will that work? And then in addition to that, if a board is legally required to make certain payments under other laws, but this law would say you cannot pay anything more than that, that'll put boards in a tough spot. So I just wanted to raise those. I think it will ultimately depend on each contract. There may be no legal issues with some contracts. There may be a lot with others. So it'll probably be all dependent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you for being here. Any other opponents? Seeing none, anyone in the neutral position? Hang on, Senator Merman. Okay, we did have on LB 800, 2 proponents, 1 opponent. And Connie Carr would be the proponent, Pat Hamburger, a proponent, and Jennifer Krager, an opponent.
Okay, thank you everyone for your attention today to this bill. I just want to say that it doesn't take a lot of authority away from school boards because as far as administrators pay, because it's a cap only. So there's not many school districts in the state or administrators in the state that it would really affect, only a few. And it was mentioned that it was only, I think, 30 cents, if I remember right, per taxpayer in the district if we would lower an administrator's pay. Typically, in a school district, when the top superintendent, the top administrator gets a higher pay, the rest of the administration also gets a higher pay. So it's not just one person, it's the whole administration typically. And let's see, Senator Breezy brought up a question. I forget what that question was, but I was going to answer that one. But I'd just also like to mention the President of the United States, if I'm correct, makes $400,000 a year. So of course that doesn't include the compensation package, total benefits, but that is not a lot higher than the superintendent of Lincoln High and or Lincoln Public Schools. And I'm not sure the compensation package would be higher than his package. So with that, I guess I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Senator Merman, any questions? Senator Linehan.
It's not really a question, just a suggestion. I think, could you get from the Nebraska or ask the Nebraska School Administrators Association to provide a list of where this would be a problem? I mean, I don't think NERCSA schools is, NERCSA testified they probably have any superintendents, and I doubt there's many stant schools. So if they could see where they're going to run into a problem. And is the bill written, it's the total package, teacher package, or just the base pay versus?
It's the total beginning teacher package. 5 times that package would not be higher than the total package of the superintendent.
So the average package is about $25,000 a year. So it'd be their base pay plus $25,000. Okay,
Yes.
That's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up there?
Senator,
And could I just, for the NERCSA, I'm not sure if you, I think your question was, are they over 200,000? And I think, I
Maybe
guess I'd
well-
have to be corrected if I'm wrong, but their total package, I think there are some with, if you include the total package, are over 200,000.
Okay.
But I could be corrected on that.
thank
Yeah.
you, Senator Linehan, Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright. Thank you, Senator Merman. Your exchange with Senator Linehan kind of had me think about something. I mean, is your intent with this measure to target administrative compensation in Lincoln and Omaha, or is it broader?
No, my intent is to, I think administration in the state, and that, now I remember the question
Okay.
Senator Breezy had.
See, that was
I
helpful.
think we overcompensate administration in this state in education relative to the number of students we have or the number of districts or however you look at it. I think we pay relatively too much for administration compared to what we pay teachers. So my purpose of this bill is a combination of the two, to raise teacher pay that is, our teachers are undercompensated, and make it more, I guess you could say, equitable or equivalent to what we pay administrators. I think our total pay that we pay administration is too high, and what we pay teachers is too low.
Okay. I think there's probably a lot of agreement on some of those big picture values there. And Senator Merman, I apologize, but did you serve on school board back home before you came to the legislature? I know a lot of legislators did.
Yes, I did.
I just
And
didn't know
actually, we
your
hired a
bio.
Superintendent while I was on the school
Okay,
board.
all right. So then you have some firsthand experience with it. And so, you know, from your time and service to our school board, then that pays even less than being a state legislator. I remember when my mom was on school board, how many hours that was for no compensation. But let me just ask you this. Typically, in most agencies, in most businesses, kind of the biggest costs, the biggest drivers in those budgets are compensation, are wages and benefits for the employees. And I'm guessing that was probably the case in your school district as well when you were serving on school board. Is that generally speaking kind of your recollection as well?
Yes, and that's typical. I know
Yeah.
in rural Nebraska and probably in urban Nebraska also, the total compensation package, the benefits are probably as important as the pay.
Yeah, and getting more and more expensive with health insurance increases kind of across the board. But I'm also wondering, you know, how a proposal like this works with your support and other members' supports for, say, for example, foisting arbitrary spending caps on local school districts. So it kind of seems like a very heavy-handed approach with kind of limiting the amount that local schools can decide to move forward within their purview and jurisdiction, and then also putting this additional kind of heavy-handed approach on their ability to recruit or retain top talent to lead their district.
Well, I suspect with this, I wouldn't call it a heavy-handed approach, by the
Okay.
way.
All right.
It doesn't affect a lot of districts, but with having some kind of a cap on pay, I don't think it will affect the number of applicants because it's still very generous pay.
Okay.
And I'm not belittling what they do. They definitely deserve a high pay. But I don't think it will go far to eliminate the number of candidates or even who the candidates are and who we hire as superintendents.
Very good. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Any other questions? Senator Lenahan.
I'm doing this more, I think somebody in the opponent said the NSEA was against this bill, but the NSEA didn't send a letter, they didn't show up.
I did not see a letter. No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lenahan.
And I could just add, it's not only Chicago that I could have paid compared to Lincoln LPS superintendent too. There's other large districts all around the country that have very similar pay to Chicago and Lincoln.
Thank you. That concludes LB 800 and the committee.